He had done this 31 times. 31 targets. 31 clean shots. Not one mistake. Not one moment of doubt. The man they called Kael crouched on a rain-slicked rooftop above Busan's Nampo waterfront, assembling his rifle in under 60 seconds. Below him, the port hummed with saltwater and the groan of container cranes. He had grown up in these streets, hungry, nameless, invisible. He did not think about that. He never thought about the past. The past was a door he had welded shut a long time ago. Through his scope, he found his target. Adrian Volkov. Russian-born crime lord. The man who controlled Busan's port like a king controls a kingdom, quietly, completely, without mercy. Volkov stood beside his convoy near the Koreang docks, and something about him surprised Kael immediately. He wasn't performing. Most powerful men Kael had studied through a rifle scope performed. They stood wide, they moved loudly, they wanted everyone around them to feel their weight. Volkov stood still. He watched the street the way a man watches something he is afraid of losing. Quiet. Almost gentle. Kael filed the observation and set it aside. It didn't matter. Nothing about a target's personality ever mattered. He placed the crosshair against Volkov's chest. 340 meters. Wind negligible. Heartbeat 44 per minute. Everything clean. He began to squeeze the trigger. Then a red football bounced into the road. And behind it, sprinting without looking, completely blind to the truck accelerating toward him from the junction, ran a small boy in a green and red Cameroon jersey. Kael's finger froze. The truck did not slow. Kael saw it in the same second he saw the boy, an old delivery vehicle running the junction at full speed, the driver's face turned away, completely unaware. The child was chasing his football with the total focus of someone for whom nothing else existed in the world. Kael's crosshair was still on Volkov. He could still fire. 2 seconds, maybe 3, before the convoy scattered. The child was 30 meters from the target. Not his problem. Not his contract. He told himself this very clearly, with the cold efficiency he had trained into himself over 20 years. His finger did not move. Because Volkov moved instead. He broke from his security detail without warning, not a cautious step, not a performance for the people watching, a full, committed sprint into the road like a man who has decided something in his body before his brain catches up. He reached the boy 1 step ahead of the truck, wrapped his arm around him, and took the truck's side mirror directly across his shoulder. They spun hard onto the road. Kael watched through the scope as Volkov steadied himself, checked the boy's face, his arms, his legs, with an expression so unguarded and raw that it looked wrong on a man like him. Pure relief. The kind you cannot fake because no one is watching. Then the boy said something in French. And Adrian Volkov, the most feared man in Busan's criminal world, laughed. Quietly. Genuinely. Kael did not fire. He told himself it was the disruption in the convoy formation. He almost believed it. Solin's voice cut through the earpiece like a blade. Confirm the kill, Kael. The window is closing. The convoy was reforming. Guards were pulling Volkov toward the armored vehicle. 20 seconds before he was behind reinforced glass and the shot became geometry without a solution. Kael had a clear line. He had held a clear line for 40 seconds. Below him, the boy was refusing to leave. He stood in front of Volkov with his arms slightly out and his chin raised, speaking in a mixture of French and Korean that tumbled over itself with complete confidence. His football was still somewhere under a market stall. He didn't seem to care about that. He cared about finishing whatever he was saying to this large, patient man who was ignoring his guards to listen. Volkov crouched. Right there on the Busan dockside. In his expensive coat. And listened. Window closed, Kael told Solon. Convoy shifted formation. I'll re-engage tomorrow. He had lied to handlers before, about timing, about positioning. But this lie was different, and some quiet part of him knew it. He did not examine the difference. He watched Volkov retrieve the red football from under a market stall and hand it to the boy. The boy tucked it under his arm like it was the most valuable object in the city. It probably was, to him. Then Volkov stood. Turned to his vehicle. Paused. He turned his head upward. Not scanning. Not guessing. He looked directly at the rooftop where Kael was crouched. For 3 full seconds. Then he got in. The boy's name was Azizi. Kael found that out the next morning, not because he went looking, but because Azizi was already standing outside Volkov's Koryang district headquarters when Kael arrived to reposition for his second attempt. Same Cameroon jersey. Same football under his arm. Standing on the pavement with the patient certainty of a child who has decided something is going to happen and is simply waiting for the world to catch up. Volkov's guards watched the boy the way adults watch a problem they cannot categorize. Then the front door opened and Volkov walked out. He saw Azizi and went completely still. Not surprised. Not irritated. Still, the way a man goes still when something he has been avoiding has finally arrived and there is nowhere left to turn from it. He crouched. He asked something. Kael's long-range audio feed barely carried the answer through the street noise, but it arrived, in a bright French-accented voice, clear as a bird in fog. Mon nom est Aziz Mbarga. My name is Aziz Mbarga. Volkov's expression did not change. But his right hand, resting on his knee, closed slowly into a fist. Then released. Then was still. He knew that name. He stood and held the building door open for the boy. Not roughly. Not reluctantly. Gently, the way a man holds a door for someone he intends to protect. Outside, the old guard Reyes lit a cigarette and muttered something that Kael's audio feed barely caught over the morning dockside noise. Why does he keep letting that African boy in? He knows exactly whose son he is. 3 days later, Solon called a face-to-face. That almost never happened. Face-to-face meant the situation had moved beyond what a phone call could contain. Kael arrived at a shuttered fish processing plant near the container port. The smell of saltwater and old machinery met him at the door. Inside, 3 men sat around a steel table, men he had never seen before but read immediately. The posture of people who have owned things for so long they've forgotten what it feels like not to. Solon stood behind them, hands clasped, watching Kael with eyes that gave nothing. The men called themselves the Council. Senior partners inside Volkov's own criminal network. They spoke with the calm of people describing facts rather than opinions. Volkov had become unpredictable. He had pulled back from major port operations, returned extortion payments to 2 shipping families, stood down from a consolidation move that would have doubled their waterfront control. They called it weakness. They said the word like it was a disease. Then Solon leaned forward and said something that landed differently than everything else. We requested you specifically, Kael. By name. Not because you're the only option. Because of your history, your file. There's something about your background that makes you the right instrument for this particular job. He did not elaborate. Kael did not ask. He had learned long ago that when Solon withheld detail, pressing for it only revealed that you cared, and caring was the first step toward being controlled. He took the contract and walked out. Behind him, a thin council member with gray eyes watched him go and said quietly to the others. He still doesn't know. Good. Keep it that way. He told himself it was professional research. Knowing the variables around a target was standard protocol. Understanding the environment meant understanding the risk. Kael had built files on every target he had ever taken. This was no different. He opened his laptop in a rented room in Siamayan district, drank cold instant coffee, and searched for a 7-year-old Cameroonian boy named Azizi Mbarga. What he found made him set the coffee down. Azizi's father, Dominic Mbarga, had come to Busan 3 years ago from Yaoundé, Cameroon. Logistics coordinator. He had secured port contracts through a Cameroonian import company and brought his family with him, a wife named Celestine, and a son who was 4 years old and already knew 3 words in Korean. 2 years after arriving, Dominic was caught passing internal shipping intelligence to a rival syndicate. He was executed on Volkov's direct order. Celestine was told he died in a dock robbery. She never received the truth. She only received the grief, and she carried it alone, in a foreign country, working laundry shifts in Busan's hotel district and sending whatever remained home to Yaoundé every month. Kael stared at the screen. Volkov had killed this child's father. And then, beginning 1 month after Dominic died, Volkov had quietly arranged anonymous bank transfers to Celestine's account. Every month. For 3 years. School fees. Rent. Never a name attached. Never an explanation. He had never stopped. At the bottom of the log, a recent note filed by Reyes. 3 weeks ago, Volkov carried Azizi home on his shoulders because the boy said his legs were tired. Subject was singing. French, maybe. Third attempt. Kael found a new position above a tea house on Bosadong, the narrow booklined street where Volkov met a contact every Wednesday evening. Clean angle. 12-second window when Volkov crossed the open courtyard. He was there an hour early. Settled. Ready. Tonight, he told himself, was not like the other nights. Volkov arrived on schedule. He paused in the courtyard before his contact came, something Kael hadn't seen in his surveillance notes. He reached into his coat. Pulled out a photograph. Stood alone in the quiet lamplight and looked at it. Kael had never used a zoom lens to look at a target's personal photograph. He did it now before his logic caught up. The photograph was worn at the edges, creased down the middle like something folded and unfolded many times. A younger Volkov crouched in a burned-out street, holding a small child wrapped inside his coat. The child's face was turned away from the camera. But Kael knew those streets. He knew that waterfront neighborhood. The crumbling buildings. The particular angle of the container cranes in the background. He had slept in the stairwell of a building on that street when he was 8 years old. It burned in a raid the following year. He barely got out. A man's arms had pulled him through the smoke. He never saw the face clearly. He had been told it was a stranger. He had spent 20 years not thinking about it. The man standing alone in that Busan courtyard, holding a worn photograph of a burning street, was not a stranger. He had never been a stranger. Kael did not fire. He sat on that rooftop until the courtyard lights went off and Busan settled into its late-night port hum. The rifle sat assembled beside him, perfectly useless. Back in his room, he pulled his own history file, the sanitized version the contractor network gave him when Solon recruited him at 14. It described his origin in 3 clinical lines: unknown street youth, no family record, sourced from Yongdo district. He cross-referenced Yongdo against city archives. The fire was a Volkov syndicate operation. A raid on a rival's storage facility that consumed a surrounding block. 3 children were inside the building. 2 were evacuated by neighbors. The third, undocumented, unnamed, was listed in the incident report as unidentified minor, evacuated separately. The officer who filed that report and marked the case closed was Director Solon. Kael read that line 3 times. Solon was there the night of the fire. Solon found him. Solon took a traumatized, nameless 9-year-old boy from the wreckage of a Volkov syndicate operation and fed him into a contractor pipeline. He did not rescue Kael. He harvested him. And the man whose operation caused that fire, the man Kael had been sent here to kill, went back into the burning building to pull a child out. No cameras. No audience. Just a decision made in smoke and heat that a child deserved to survive the damage being done around him. Kael sat in the dark for a long time. Then Solin's message arrived. 4 words, flat and cold. The council is watching. He should have let it happen. A rival faction was moving on Volkov's convoy that evening. Kael picked it up through a monitored port frequency. 4 vehicles. 8 shooters. A clean kill window near the Jagalki fish market. If Volkov died to another gang's bullet, the contract dissolved. Kael walked away clean. No decision to make. He told himself this was the logical outcome and settled into a surveillance position to watch it play out. The ambush hit at 7 in the evening, between the market stalls, amid the shouting of Korean fishmongers and the bright fabric stalls run by African women near the waterfront entrance. It was brutal and immediate. Volkov's guards went down fast. Volkov himself took cover behind an overturned vehicle, bleeding from a graze wound across his arm, shielding 2 of his men with his own body. Then Kael found Azizi in the scope. The boy was walking home from school along the market route. He stood frozen in the entrance of a fabric stall, 6 meters from the nearest gunman, clutching his football to his chest while the world exploded around him. Kael fired. He didn't decide. His body decided for him, first the lead shooter, then the second, then the third. 45 seconds. 0 misses. The ambush fractured. One of the African market women pulled Azizi inside her stall and held him tight, speaking in a language soft enough to cut through gunfire. Volkov looked up at the rooftop. This time he didn't scan. He pointed at Reyes and said, low and certain. Find out who that is. I already know. I need you to confirm it. Solin called within the hour. Kael had heard many versions of Solin's voice across 14 years, flat, cold, precise. He had never heard this version. Controlled fury. The kind of anger locked behind professionalism so long that when it surfaces, it sounds almost polite. Someone had interfered in a coordinated operation near the Jagalki market. A long-range shooter. Professional. The council wanted answers tonight. Kael said nothing. And as Solin kept talking, the picture assembled itself in Kael's mind with terrible clarity, the clarity of a man realizing he has been standing inside a trap he helped build. The rival faction's ambush was not random. The council had fed them Volkov's route, timing, and security blind spots. It was a backup plan, built in from the beginning, in case Kael delayed. He was never their only weapon. He was their preferred weapon because either outcome benefited them. If Kael completed the hit, they owned him forever. A man who kills the person who once saved him could be controlled for the rest of his life. If he hesitated, they had proof of contractor failure they could weaponize. He had been a piece on their board since day one. He had never been a person to them at all. A second contractor has been dispatched, Solin said, finally allowing the professional mask to slip one careful fraction. She arrived in Busan this morning. Her name is Voss. Kael waited. Her contract covers the primary target, the Cameroonian boy, and contract cleanup. A pause. Which means you, Kael. Kael knew Voss by reputation. Not better than him. Different. Where Kael had developed hesitation over 11 days of watching a child chase a football through Busan streets, Voss had no hesitation to develop. She was what Kael was designed to be before something in him refused the final shape of the design. He tracked her through the city's camera network. She moved unhurried, buying street food near Koreang as cover, a professional's trick, making herself look local before she worked. He found her secondary target list through a backdoor in Solin's operational server. The priorities were laid out in the bloodless language of logistics. First, Aziz Mbarga. Then, Volkov. Then, Kael. The council's reasoning was written plainly: remove the emotional anchor first. Subject will be destabilized. Extraction cleaner. An emotional anchor. That was what a 7-year-old Cameroonian boy in a football jersey had become on a council document. Kael found Voss on a rooftop above the narrow alley where Celestine and Aziz's building stood. She had taken position facing the third-floor window where a bedroom light was still on. Through his scope, Kael could see Aziz sitting in the window the way he did every night before sleep, football in his lap, watching the distant port lights shimmer on the harbor water. Kael moved. The confrontation was brief and extremely violent. Voss was good. She was on her feet twice before it ended. On the ground with Kael's knee against her chest, she looked up at him and said with complete calm. Solon told me you'd come for the boy first. He said your sentimentality would make you exactly this predictable. You're right where he wants you, Kael. Kael moved Azizi before dawn. He knocked on Celestine's door at 4 in the morning and spoke to her in the broken French he hadn't used in over a decade. He showed her Voss's equipment through the window, the rifle case, the spotting scope, the position above her child's bedroom, and watched her face move through shock and then passed it into the focused calm of a woman who has survived harder things and simply needs to know her son is safe. She let him take Azizi. Azizi came out dressed, carrying his football, wearing the serious expression of a child who understands more of the situation than the adults around him are giving him credit for. Outside the building, 12 of Volkov's men were already positioned, 3 directions, perfect coverage. They had been tracking Kael for at least 2 days. He could have fought through. He looked at Azizi, told him in French to stay still and not be afraid, and put his hands up. Volkov was waiting in a safe room above Busan harbor. He looked at Kael for a long moment. Then he said, in Korean, without anger. I identified you on the 3rd day. The way you select rooftops, always above a market, always with a street exit below. I moved through this city exactly that way, when I had nothing. I taught that instinct to a boy once, without knowing I was doing it. He slid a file across the table. Kael's original records. His real ones. Solon's name on the intake form. The date matching the week of the Yangdo fire exactly. At the bottom, in different handwriting, Volkov's own, 1 line. He doesn't know I recognized him. Wait until he's ready to hear it. Kael read the file without speaking. Volkov set 2 cups of barley tea on the table and waited. Outside the window, Busan harbor was pale silver in the early morning, the container cranes standing over the water like enormous, patient animals. The file confirmed everything Kael had pieced together, and filled in the parts he hadn't. Solon's program had run for 14 years. 11 recruits, sourced from damaged children in conflict zones across East Asia. Most were dead. The ones still living had no idea who truly owned them. The council didn't just want Volkov removed. They wanted a replacement who would never develop a conscience. A puppet, and Solon would hold the strings. Kael looked up from the last page. The night of the Yangdo fire, he said. Did you know what I was going to become? Volkov was quiet for long enough that the steam rose and fell from both cups. No, he said finally. You were a child in a burning building and I had caused the fire. That was all I knew. I've thought many times about whether knowing would have changed anything. He paused. I don't have a clean answer to that. It was not the absolution Kael hadn't known he needed. But it was the truth, with all the rough edges of a truth that doesn't resolve anything and is therefore completely real. Reyes entered the room. He handed Volkov a phone without a word. 2 lines on the screen, in Korean. We have the Cameroonian boy. Come to the Koreang waterfront warehouse. Midnight. Or we send the mother a box. The room changed. Not loudly. Volkov set the phone on the table with the slow, deliberate care of a man applying every muscle in his body to staying in control of himself. He did not speak for 30 seconds. His men stood completely still. They had learned that when Volkov went this quiet, the situation had passed through serious into something beyond it. Then he gave 3 orders, low, precise, in Russian. The men moved immediately. Kael watched him prepare and understood something he had been circling for 11 days without landing on. Azizi was not just guilt made physical. He was proof. Every time Volkov had chosen the boy over the Empire's coldest logic, crouching to his level, carrying him home, walking him through dangerous streets, he had been making a quiet decision about who he was still capable of being. The boy was the evidence of a man trying to change. If Azizi died tonight in that warehouse because Volkov had built a world that consumed the innocent, then every one of those decisions meant nothing. He could not let that happen. Volkov turned to Kael with no performance behind the words. You can walk out right now. I'll give you the file, everything Solon built, your real records. Take it and disappear. No consequences. A pause. Or come with me to that warehouse and we finish this together. He left the door open, literally, and walked out. Kael stood alone in the room. He looked at the open door. He looked at his rifle. He picked it up. They moved on the warehouse at 11. Kael took the external positions first, a shooter on a container stack and a second on the warehouse roof. For shots from a crane platform 300 meters across the water. Clean. Sequential. The port wind was slight and he had accounted for it before Volkov's team even reached the building. The loading dock entrance opened. The breach began. Kael moved through the upper levels alone, clearing each floor with the efficiency of a man who has done this in worse buildings, in worse countries, at worse hours. 2 positions neutralized on the 2nd floor. 1 on the 3rd who heard him coming and didn't hear quite enough. Azizi was on the ground floor. A back storage room. 1 guard, a boy of maybe 19, Korean, local, holding the weapon at the wrong angle. When Kael came through the door, the young guard dropped the gun instantly and pressed his back against the wall, hands shaking. They paid me to stand here. I didn't know, I have a little brother, please. Kael looked at him. Young enough to be the child this city had once tried to swallow. He zip-tied him to a support beam, told him to stay quiet and he would not be harmed, and opened the storage room door. Azizi was sitting on the floor with his football in his lap, back straight, waiting. He looked up and said in French, as simply as stating a fact. Je savais que quelqu'un viendrait. I knew someone would come. He took Kael's hand. Then the wall exploded. Smoke poured through the ground floor. The council had triggered the device early, the moment Kael's shots were heard across the water. The building was filling fast. They had 90 seconds. Kael got Azizi out through a 3rd-floor window onto a rusted fire escape, lowered him the final 4 meters, and dropped him into the arms of a Volkov guard waiting below. Then he went back in. The smoke was thick on the 2nd floor now, rolling in dark waves from below. Kael found Volkov pinned near the warehouse office, a section of ceiling had collapsed across the corridor, and 2 council shooters were advancing from the east end, cutting off the exit. He removed them from behind. Then he pulled the ceiling section clear with both hands, grabbed Volkov's arm, and they ran. They came out through the loading dock 40 seconds before the waterfront wall gave way and the entire lower structure collapsed into the harbor. They stood in the cold Busan night and watched the building fall. Within minutes, Volkov's communications team intercepted an active channel. Drav, the council leader, was not fleeing. He was broadcasting. Feeding Volkov's port records, financial structures, and personnel files simultaneously to a Korean financial journalist, a police contact, and 2 rival syndicate leaders, offering everything in exchange for immunity. Positioning himself as the brave whistleblower. Positioning Volkov as the architect of every crime ever committed. Kael understood it in an instant. The assassination was never the primary plan. This was. Drav didn't want Volkov dead. He wanted Volkov's name to carry all the weight, so that Drav could walk free beneath it. Then Azizi's voice came from the back of a car. Small. Clear. Mon père. My father. How did he die? The fire reflected in Volkov's eyes. He turned to face the boy and did not speak for a long, full moment. Volkov answered. Not all of it. Not the cold operational detail that a 7-year-old could not be asked to hold. But enough, that Azizi's father had made choices that put him in danger. That those choices crossed into Volkov's world. That Volkov could not undo what happened, but that a decision he made alone, 3 years ago, told to no one and never acknowledged, had been the only response he knew how to make. He did not dress it up. He did not ask for forgiveness. Azizi sat very still and processed this the way children process hard information, slowly, seriously, without the escape routes adults use. Then he asked, in careful Korean carrying the rhythm of French underneath it. Are you going to die tonight? Volkov said he didn't know. Azizi looked at him with the direct, unfiltered gaze of a child who has decided this moment is important enough for complete honesty, and said. Alors any meurs pas. Then don't die. Not forgiveness. Something harder than forgiveness. A child who had every reason to turn away, choosing instead to place the weight of his words on the side of someone's future. Kael watched through the car window. He thought about Solon, who found a 9-year-old in a fire and turned him into an instrument. He thought about Volkov, who caused that fire and ran back into it. He thought about Azizi, who had more reason for bitterness than either of them, sitting in the back of a car in his Cameroon jersey, choosing something else entirely. Nothing resolved in that moment. But something clarified, deeply, finally, like smoke lifting off still water. Then Solon's voice came through Kael's earpiece. A channel he had deactivated 3 days ago. I know where you are. I know what you've chosen. Come back in, or I burn everything. Celestine's visa. Every protection Volkov arranged. 1 hour. Solon had built a public summit. Framed as an emergency peace meeting between Busan's faction leadership. Broadcast through criminal networks as legitimate. The location was the lower plaza of Yongdusan Park, wide open, visible, international. The kind of place where whatever happened would be seen by everyone. Volkov's team confirmed 4 sniper positions on surrounding rooftops, a vehicle bomb in a catering truck near the plaza center, and Solon himself confirmed to be on the ground. Kael mapped it out and felt the cold understanding arrive without sentiment. The earpiece call had not been a negotiation. It had been a trigger. Solon needed Volkov agitated and moving toward open ground. The 1-hour pressure window was engineering, force a decision, force movement, force visibility. By receiving the threat and bringing it to Volkov, Kael had functioned exactly as Solon designed him, even in defection. He had been built too well. He told Volkov everything. Volkov's response came without hesitation, I will not run from Drav. Not tonight. Not with every port faction watching. He moved Azizi and Celestine to a safe house 3 kilometers away. 4 guards. Door locked. He looked at Kael with the quiet certainty of a man who has accepted what the next hour requires. You are better than anything Drav has on those rooftops. I know that because I've watched you work for 11 days. Prove it. Kael moved into position above the plaza before the convoy arrived. He was mapping the 4 sniper locations when he found Azizi through the scope. The boy was standing at the lower plaza entrance. Cameroon jersey. football under his arm. Watching Volkov's convoy arrive. He had followed. Alors and Emir's pa had not been a sentence. It had been a promise he intended to witness. 6 targets. 1 child in the open. The geometry was impossible if Kael tried to do both simultaneously. He radioed a Volkov guard on a side channel, gave Azizi's exact position, and began moving across the Yongdusan rooftops with everything he had. No hesitation. No survival calculation. 20 years of being shaped into a weapon, applied entirely to one purpose. First sniper, gone. Second, gone. Third, 30 seconds total. The fourth got a shot off before Kael reached the angle. The round missed Volkov and struck the plaza stone 2 meters from where the guard was pulling Azizi to safety. Too close. The catering truck bomb activated remotely the moment the third shot sounded. Solon had been monitoring every frequency. 25 seconds showing on Kael's scanner. He found the detonation relay frequency in 4 seconds. Calculated the vehicle angle. Fired 1 shot through the engine block from 260 meters. The relay shattered. The bomb did not fire. In the silence after, Solon walked from beneath a plaza archway into the open. Not running. Not panicking. Walking, the measured, professional stride of a man who prepared for every outcome except the one unfolding in front of him. In his hand was a weapon. His eyes were already on Volkov. The man who built Kael. Who pulled a 9-year-old from the wreckage of a burning building and spent 14 years deciding what to do with him afterward. Kael had a clean shot. He took it. Solon went down in the center of the plaza without a sound. The port hummed beneath everything, indifferent and constant, the way Busan had always been. Volkov looked up at the rooftop. It was empty. Kael was already 3 buildings away, moving through the dark. 3 weeks later, the city reorganized itself. Port cities always do, practically, quietly, without the luxury of long mourning. Busan absorbed the violence of that night the way it absorbed everything, into its infrastructure, into its routine, into the salt air and the sound of container ships that never stopped moving. Volkov used the council's own materials against them. Every exposure document Drav had assembled was now in Volkov's hands, and he dismantled what remained of the council's structure with surgical precision. Some faction leaders accepted the terms he offered. Others did not. The ones who refused were handled in ways the city chose not to investigate. Volkov did not become a good man. He never claimed to. But he made one decision, alone, without instruction, without an audience. Celestine Barga received a formal letter granting her family permanent residency in South Korea. Filed. Legitimate. Untouchable. Inside the envelope was a second letter, handwritten in French, from a man who did not sign his name. It described what happened to Dominic Barga. All of it. No justification. No softening. Just the truth, and 2 words at the bottom. Je suis désolé. I am sorry. Azizi received a separate envelope. Directions to an address in Busan's Saha district. The building had been a warehouse. Now it was a school, wide windows facing the street, a sign above the door in Korean, French, and English. No listed owner. Anonymous funding. But the design told a story to anyone who knew how to read it. Every room had a clear sight line to the entrance. The roof held a ladder with no architectural purpose except to give someone a place to stand and watch over the street below. Years later, Azizi was 17. He found a photograph in his mother's things while helping her move, long exposure, taken from street level at the Yongdusan Plaza on the night everything changed. In the background, at the top of a building on the plaza's eastern edge, barely visible against the dark sky, was a silhouette. A figure. The unmistakable outline of a rifle. watching over everything below. Azizi had never been told the full story of that night. He looked at the photograph for a long time. He thought about the school. The scholarship that appeared when he turned 14, from a foundation with no public address. The red football a Russian crime lord once picked up from under a market stall and handed back to him on a Busan dock. He put the photograph in the inside pocket of his jacket, against his chest, and went to class.